Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 5. Sorry it's been a little delay between the episodes, just had some stuff to do. Busy dude sometimes. Anyway, today's episode we're just going to go over some super basic stuff, but really just build a foundation on how to be a great IGL. Now, just for a disclaimer, I have not actually IGL'd many teams, only been in IGL for a tiny bit on one or two teams. But this is my experience. I've played with a lot of IGLs, good and bad, so I feel like I have quite a good understanding on what an IGL is supposed to do and the things that you guys can focus on in your journey to becoming a better IGL. When we talk about IGLing, we need to think back to the roles of episode 1 and think about what type of attributes an IGL has to see if you personally fit with this type of role. So I think the main idea of an IGL is these kind of 4 pillars, right? Leadership role, right? Every IGL needs to have some, at least hopefully, some aspect of leadership, right? You need to be able to take charge of the game. The team is essentially trusting you with following how your play style and how you want to play the game. There's a lot of trust placed into that one individual. So you have to direct and control the team in a way that you enjoy and the way that you want to play the game. Now, most IGLs, there are a few who don't do this, but generally speaking, 99% of IGLs need to be quite selfless. You need to do what needs to be done. You need to be always thinking about the team. It's not really about yourself at that point. It's more about the team and positioning your team in a position that will get points, right? That's the goal. Then you have to communicate. Honestly, this is probably the biggest part, and usually IGLs just have the best communication, purely because you need to be able to express your ideas clearly to your team, and this needs to be done in a way where everyone understands them and everyone's on the same page, right? So communication is obviously very important. And the last part, which is honestly what differentiates good IGLs and great IGLs, is the studying, the pre-planning, the problem solving. These are crucial skills that pretty much all IGLs need to be familiar with to some degree. But the better you get at these things, mostly studying, pre-planning, and problem solving, is really going to determine how good of a leader on your squad you're going to be. So when we think about the types of IGLing, I think there's like 5-ish types. Now, I could be wrong, but this is just my general idea of super dumbed down version. So I think there's 5 styles. There's a center-oriented style. These teams like going to the middle. They play quite straightforward, a very simple game. You have an edge-oriented style. These callers like getting information. They like having lots of options. They like having lots of information. Then you have flexible IGLs. These IGLs are very confident in doing both 1 and 2, so they're quite confident in both situations. Again, kind of similar to roles, like you want to be able to do as much as you can as an IGL, so being flexible is super important, and honestly where you should try and go for. A 4th type of IGL is a very sendy IGL playstyle. I would, if you want to picture this, think of a lot of the Turkish teams. A lot of the Turkish teams are very sendy. They will do huge sends to positions very early in the game. So that's a type of style that can produce a placement. And then the last IGL style is a bit more of a selfish style. Don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I'm sure if you're a competitive PUBG player, you could think of at least one IGL who does abandon his team every now and then, and it does work sometimes, but remember, like, being an IGL, you're a part of a team, you're the team's captain and leader. So if you do this, the rest of your unit needs to be very well coordinated and understand what you're trying to achieve. So when it comes to IGLing, every type of style kind of has a difficulty, a reward process, like the risk of playing this way, and then there's going to be, subsequently, you can get more placement points, you can get more kills. All of these styles kind of fit into one of these 5 categories. There's probably more, but I'm just trying to dumb it down, make it really simple. But just think about how you want to call and see what type of player you really are, because IGLing is truly just a reflection of yourself and how you want to play the game. Alright, so the main question I get asked a lot is like, what do IGLs like do? Like, man, like what do they actually say and do, right? Well, I think the primary job of an IGL, especially in today's meta, is just determining the early to mid-game rotations and lead the team into favorable scouting positions, and basically just early game, essentially, early and mid-game. IGLs tend to make the final decision in a lot of cases, but I think with the experience, and there's just so many teams nowadays that have so many experienced players that those end game calls kind of just come in the heat of the moment, right? And you should be able to trust everyone in your team to make a good decision, especially when information is presented in front of you. But IGLs usually do the early game work, as this is setting up the team for success. So I've created a little checklist which I think everyone can apply, especially new players. Remember, this series is mostly directed towards new players and new teams. So when you're rotating as an IGL, you should be thinking about 5 things. Well, first, you should be tracking enemies around you. So when you're landing in a city, you should see and ask your teammates to track who's in the cities nearby. Is there a team to your west? Is there a team to your north? You should be tracking enemies around you. You should be then, once you've looted, determine a safe path into zone. You want to make sure that you're driving and rotating in a way that you're not going through a choke point, you're not going to get camped, at least trying to minimize camping, and you're really just trying to get into the zone, onto the edge, or just into positions to scout. So this can sometimes be outside a zone. So for example, number 3, find a position to gather information. Sometimes you will need to gather information outside the zone to move in, and then you can keep going forward. But as a general rule of thumb, finding a position to gather information from is one of the key parts of a rotation, especially early game. You're finding a spot to stop, gather info, and then you can make decisions. That's where we go into number 4, utilizing the information that we've been presented by our own 2 eyes and our teammates' eyes to get deeper into the zone if we want to get more central, which as a general rule of thumb, we usually want to try and push for middle as much as we can, or we can set up a good control. So controlling the edge, we're going to set up around, get lots of angles, get lots of information and line of sight onto stuff in front of us so we have lots of decisions to do. And then the last one is we're going to listen to teammates' suggestions and discuss any ideas for pre-planning on Circle Pop. We're going to get into pre-planning because pre-planning is just such a huge part of learning to IGL. I think if you learn to pre-plan, you're going to get a lot better, a lot quicker. And honestly, it's one of the most rewarding ways to play PUBG because you never want to die in a way that, or like for a reason that you can't control, right? You want to control how you die. So if you pre-plan and you do something that you wanted to do and you die, we can learn from that. So we're going to discuss quickly why pre-planning is super essential. Now, a lot of IGLs don't do this, right? A lot of teams and IGLs will just get into zone, they'll set up, and they'll just wait for zone to pop, right? And I think this is such a bad habit to get into. Once you're in a zone, you should be discussing things as much as you can. Honestly, even our team, we sometimes get complacent and just lazy, and that's more so because we understand the game, so we kind of know subconsciously what the rest of everyone else is thinking, right? But anyway, if you are learning, you should be pre-planning. And why do we pre-plan? Well, because it saves a tremendous amount of just time, right? If we're making a decision, we want to do this as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible to reduce any opportunities for opponents. For example, if we are on our cars ready to breach a compound or backfill it, if a team is also doing the same thing and they're there 30 seconds earlier, our game is completely over. So if sometimes 30 seconds is all it takes to completely change the outcome of our game. Secondly, communication. As we said, IGLs have a very important role of communicating to their team, but if we're able to pre-plan and communicate our goals and what our intentions are to our team, there's going to hopefully be less micro mistakes on average because everyone knows what we're doing. It's been discussed. It's been pre-planned. We're ready to do it. Everyone has it in their mind. So communication is likely to improve if we pre-plan. And then, as I said, planning will allow you to learn faster. If you are looking at every zone and thinking, what do I do for this shift, this shift, this shift? What happens if it goes south, west, east, north? We're going to be thinking a lot more and asking our team to think a lot more, which in turn will create some better habits and hopefully make us a bit smarter over time. All right, guys. So the question is, what should I be pre-planning, right? Like, what do I think about? What do I discuss with my team? Well, there's 3 things we should discuss. The first one that is a bit more risky, but it's always good to have sends in mind, especially for bad shifts where we have no priority on getting into zone, is a send. So a clearly marked rotate to a low priority area, which is more central, right? The idea of a send is to get us into as close to the middle of the next circle as possible in a safe position where we can reset, gather info, and then we can prepare for number 2 or number 3. So the second type of pre-planning we should be doing is a backfill. If we're sitting behind other compounds, we should be watching for enemy teams to regroup on their splits. If we see a 2-2 or a 1-1-1-1 or a 2-1-1, just like the splits we talked about in earlier episodes, we should be taking advantage of this. And if we see a team leave a compound, we should be backfilling them. We should be taking it behind them and then gathering info from there. This is really, really important, and it should be a staple of every competitive team, always looking for backfills and seeing what space we can get for free. Now be careful, you might get baited by these, so make sure your information is good. And the last thing, types of pre-planning, is defending and controlling. If we get fed, if we get fed, what do we want to do? Well, we should control this area. That's where defending comes in. Controlling to the space that is given to you or regrouping on certain compounds is a type of pre-plan. Sometimes it's important to regroup quickly or spread out quickly or defend to certain areas of the map, as we need to do this to reduce weaknesses and prevent opportunities for enemy teams. So these types of pre-planning are really going to help us develop as an IGL, because we're going to have a much better idea of what we're doing on every single zone, or at least try to have a better idea. Obviously, you can't pre-plan for every single shift, but having a good idea on what to do on a lot of them is seriously going to help your IGLing. So I hope this episode helps. I'm not going to do an end of a final slide or whatever, that seems to be a waste of time, but this is just a really basic episode just to get everyone's heads around what IGLing is. Next episode, we're probably going to do a quick review, so we'll learn how to VOD review together so you guys can improve. And I feel like that's the direction we can go in. So then we can start looking into some more complex stuff and talk about more stuff like that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.